Cowslip, 1986. His head seemed to explode. He felt the great roar in his ears, the pounding of blood, then the sensation that his skull was riddled with holes. Fire poured through the holes, from his ears and nostrils, then his mouth. James Bond jerked awake, realizing several things at once. The roar came from 2 Soviet jets, afterburners, guzzling fuel as they passed overhead. He recalled that, at the briefing, they had said military jets often flew low over the mountains, heading back to their base near Russia's oldest seaport, Archangel. He also cursed himself for falling from a doze into a deep sleep. He stretched, trying to ease his aching muscles, then moved very slowly to glance at his watch. It was nearly time to go, and he was cold and suffering from cramps. He listened and could still hear the jets receding, but no sound of the spotter aircraft which used the airfield far below. The spotter plane was over 60 years old, a Friesless Storch captured at Stalingrad from Hitler's Luftwaffe. To watch it would be like seeing an old Roman ballista on the electronic battlefield of the 1980s. Wide awake now, Bond looked around, alert, becoming orientated. He lay at the top of a high ridge within the bowl surrounded by dark, hostile mountains. To his right was the long, man-made lake, and in front of him the squat concrete guardhouse blocking entry to the top of the vast dam, which rose some 800 feet from the valley floor. Below the dam, the ground was a mass of boulders and rocks, but he knew these were only camouflage, for they were cemented into almost 20 feet of bomb-proof stressed concrete and steel. Beneath these rocks lay the target, Biochemical Processing Plant No. 1. In spite of the 1972 convention, the Soviets had gone on making biological and chemical warheads deep under the earth in this bleak place. Until now, M had told them, the manufacture was confined to known horrors, anthrax and a number of nerve and more conventional gases, but now the place was being retooled to produce something far more deadly, one of the many viruses which were being isolated as man slowly destroyed the world's rainforest. Within a couple of weeks, the underground factory would be capable of producing a biological agent which was the stuff of nightmares. A fast-spreading virus capable of thinning the blood of its victims, rapidly breaking down the human body so that one by one the main organs would shut down. This was a quick, though terrifying, death. The Soviets at least had to be slowed down, if not stopped altogether, from producing warheads and bomblets containing this catastrophic agent. M had been clear about the urgency. The West needed time to work out some form of immunization, and it was down to James Bond, 007, and his old friend, Alec Trevelyan, 006, to get the job done. "You're my 2 best men," the old man had said, "and we're all aware that this operation gives you only a 50-50 chance of return. But I have no other option. The place must be destroyed now. Another few weeks, and it'll be too late." In the here and now, Bond turned his head and looked down into the valley, reflecting on the repulsive nature of the work going on beneath the brutal earth in this godforsaken bleak area in the far north of the Soviet Empire. The only visible sign of life below him was the rough runway, which scarred the ground like an open wound, ending only about 30 feet from the edge of a long gorge which ran parallel to the dam at the far end of the plateau above the valley floor. The gorge was around a mile wide and very deep, with its own valley floor. The runway, they had been told, was one of the 2 ways in and out of the processing plant. Workers, security troops and scientists were flown in and out using an old Antov An-14B, which had been modified and given a VSTOL, very short takeoff and landing, capabilities. The other entrance and exit was by a crude underground railway, cut in the late 1960s through earth and rock, enabling personnel and product to be linked with the port of Archangel. The rolling stock of this unsophisticated transport system consisted mainly of flatbed cars to carry products and open carriages with hardwood seats for staff and troops. The journey from Archangel to the processing plant took almost 24 hours, a day of intense discomfort. Alec Trevelyan had been inserted 3 days before into Archangel itself, and, if all the documents were in order, and nobody had questioned his cover, he should by now have made the long underground journey into the processing plant itself. M had seen it as a two-handed job. Trevelyan was to get in and provide an entrance through one of the grilles set into the thick rock, close to an air conditioning unit. Inside, he was also charged with preparing a safe zone for which he and Bond would operate. Bond's task was to take out the 2 guards at their post, on top of the dam, then to carry the arms and explosives down to Trevelyan. They were then to blast the secret facility to hell and make their way back to an extraction point some 20 miles east of Archangel. Nobody concerned had any doubts as to the near-suicidal nature of the operation. Operation Cowslip. Bond gave a wry smile at the code name, thinking it was singularly inappropriate for what they were to do. There's many a slip twixt cow and lip, he thought, his smile broadening. Again he stretched his legs and arms. He had been lying in this position, less than 50 yards from the guard post, for over 7 hours after being parachuted, using the high-altitude, low-operating halo technique, from a stealth-equipped aircraft, 8 hours before. He had landed short of his DZ, and it had taken an hour to climb the 1/4 of a mile up the rocky incline leading to the small outcrop of rock, which had given him access to the guard post. The post was simply a square concrete and steel structure perched on the edge of the dam's top. There was a window and a door on Bond's side of the building, and he knew from the briefing photographs that inside there was room for 2 permanent guards to eat, relax and sleep. He also knew that on the far side was a kind of enclosed dog pen, constructed of high steel bars with a sliding electronic gate at the end, which led out to the walkway on the top of the dam itself. The soldiers who manned this post were part of the security detail on permanent assignment to Biochemical Processing Plant No. 1. These were troops drawn from the KGB Border Guard Department, all of whom had undergone special extra training with the elite Spetsnaz troops. The other end of the dam needed no such guards, as it A-butted straight onto a sheer rock face. The pair of guards would change weekly, making a tough and unpleasant climb up a set of wide D-shaped rungs set firmly into the dam's vertical wall. For a second, he wondered what the climb would be like in the bleakest midwinter. Even Bond shuddered at the thought. Then, knowing that the time for his own descent was nearing, he mentally checked off the equipment he carried. He wore a specially designed wetsuit, climbing boots, and a long parka. The wetsuit and parka were both a stone grey colour and contained more zippered and buttoned pockets than you would find in a poacher's greatcoat. In Bond's case, he carried equipment wrapped around his chest under the parka, and a long pocket containing what he hoped would be his ultimate salvation ran down the right thigh of the wetsuit. Further, a broad webbing belt was clipped around his waist. At least 4 pouches were threaded onto the belt, plus a webbing holster for his weapon of choice, the ASP 9mm, loaded with ferocious glacier ammunition and fitted with a long noise reduction cylinder. His face and head were covered in an insulated ski mask, while his hands were protected by skin-tight leather gloves, which kept out the cold without reducing his ability to use his fingers for the most delicate of tasks. In his head, he ticked off the contents of the pockets and pouches, as he had done a dozen times before. The cold and fatigue had pushed him into a dangerous sleep. As he went through the items, Bond became aware of noise, the splutter and buzz of the store engines far away below on the edge of the runway. It was the first signal, for the old spotter aircraft ran regular patrols over the area, its pilots making sure that no civilian climbing enthusiast, or worse, enemies of the state, had made their way just a shade too close to the restricted area. The Storch flew a preset pattern, which seldom varied and took around 20 minutes to complete. Its final manoeuvre was to fly low across the lake, passing over the dam at its midpoint. From the large greenhouse cockpit, the pilot would scan the guard post, and routine security required that one of the KGB border guards would come out into the steel cage and signal an all clear to the aircraft. In spite of the fact that there was both a two-way radio and a telephone in the guard post. This was the kind of instruction beloved of Colonel Omarov, the officer in charge of security. Arkady Grigorich Omarov, a senior officer of the KGB border guards, was well known to Western agents such as Bond. It was said of him that his view of security was so paranoid that should he ever get his way, he would have guards, watching guards, watching guards, and so on to infinity. Below, the Enigma pitch changed on the Feisler Storch as it began its take-off run. Bond rose slowly, flexing his limbs. Then he noiselessly ran towards the building, flattening himself against the wall to the right of the grimy window. As he did so, he was aware of the aircraft climbing out of the valley. Quickly, he leaned inwards, peering through the window. The two guards sat opposite one another, concentrating on a chess game. What happens, he wondered, if they miss their cue by not signalling to the plane? The aircraft noise was receding. Now he detected another change of engine noise, and an increase in sound as, far out over the lake, it began to line up with the centre of the dam. Pressed against the wall, he clearly heard the guards' voices and the scrape as a chair was pushed back. Once more, he leaned towards the window. One of the men was opening the door on the dam side and walking out into the steel enclosure. The other soldier still sat at the table, his entire concentration on the chessboard. Listening for the aircraft's approach, Bond removed the automatic pistol from its holster and edged towards the door. As he passed the window, he could see that the guard outside was shielding his eyes, looking upwards. In one fluid movement, he opened the door, stepped inside the building, and lifted his right hand. The man puzzling over the chessboard was so engrossed that his reactions were considerably slowed. He turned, looked blankly at Bond, as though he was someone from another planet, then began to push his chair back, his face a mixture of surprise, fear, and disbelief. The automatic made little noise, just a quiet "ft, ft." In fact, the metallic click of the mechanism seemed louder than the actual rounds being fired. Bond winced slightly as the two glaziers blew into the man's chest, right over the heart, the pair hitting within a quarter of an inch of each other. Overkill, Bond thought, as the twin odours of gun smoke and blood twitched at his nostrils. His lifetime experience taught him to always fire 2 rounds in the traditional manner. With the glaziers, you only needed 1, for 90% of victims hit by this round ended up dead within seconds, it being virtually a shotgun cartridge. The number 12 shot floating in liquid Teflon within a thin cupronickel jacket, the bullet sealed with a plastic cap. It was the sudden outward explosion of the number 12 shot, once the bullet entered the body, that did the damage. The dead soldier's chair had been pushed back almost to the wall by the impact. Now the body slumped to one side and fell to the floor, one arm flapping against the chessboard, scattering the pieces. The spotter aircraft was passing overhead, and as Bond stepped over the body, so the telephone began to ring. Bond hesitated, a fraction too long, his eyes searching for the incoming point. The telephone rang 5 times before he reached down and ripped the jack from the socket. By then, he heard the other guard running back towards the building. He could hear the man's boots thudding on the paving and could imagine him unholstering his pistol. "Definitely not officer material," Bond murmured. The man was just rushing back, without even making a tactical appraisal of what might, or might not, be happening inside the guard post. He exploded through the door, the little Stechnik automatic waving, almost out of control, in his hands. This time, Bond fired only once. The second soldier spun to the left, hit the wall, and collapsed, leaving a trail of smeared blood behind him. In the silence that followed, 2 of the chess pieces rolled at his feet. "Checkmate," Bond muttered, taking stock of the situation, looking specifically for the control to the gate out on the top of the dam. The big metal button, like an unpolished silver mushroom, was set inside the wall, high to the left of the door, just where they said it would be. He glanced at his watch, seeing that there was not much time left. If all had gone smoothly, Alec Trevelyan would be in place waiting for him. The plan had been to set the charge and go out while the bulk of the plant's staff were on their 1 hour's mid-morning break. He unzipped the parka and began to unwind the cumbersome, thick, elasticated rope from around his body, curling it around his left arm, making certain that the entire length was free and that there was no danger of it getting tangled. In the next few minutes, his life would depend on the strength and pliability of this piece of equipment, which he coiled so that the strengthened noose was in his left hand and the big spring clip in his right. Reaching up, Bond banged the big button which controlled the outer gate, hitting it squarely with the spring clip. He heard the whine of the metal from the far end of the cage, looked out, and saw that the way onto the wide top of the dam was clear. Taking a deep breath, he began to sprint forward.